Welcome to Flow with Recess, a podcast to help you unlock your best self. Join Chief Psychology Officer of Recess, Matt Swartz, and our CEO, Kelz Bethel, your hosts on this journey to flow.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Flow with Recess podcast. This is Matt Swartz.
And I'm Kelz.
We're happy to have you guys with us for episode 2, Flow, right? Flow with Recess. Now you know what recess is. What's flow?
Yeah.
We want to talk a little bit about flow state and what it looks like and why we might want it and any cool stuff around flow.
Good. So when we think about flow, I mean, some people may have heard about flow, some people may not. So Matt, what exactly is this idea of flow or flow state? What exactly is flow state really?
Yeah. So we're going to start with an academic psychological definition, and then we'll talk kind of our pop culture understanding, and then we'll even get a little into, flow inside a spiritual context. And ultimately, I'm hoping that we can marry all of those together, in Recess's conceptualization of flow. So the academics explanation of flow is a mental state when the challenge and the skill level are both high, where a sense of self evaporates and you feel fully immersed in the task at hand. So maybe you're playing basketball and you're really good at it, and this is a really awesome team, and you're playing, and that sort of like inner chatter that would come in your head that goes, oh, should I do that, or should I pass to him, or is just kind of gone, and you're just moving with the flow of the situation. Again, maybe some of you find this in work, some of you find this in art, some of you find this in sports. There's a bunch of different places, but the key of that academic understanding is you need to be in a situation where the challenge and the skill are both high, and you're going to notice the quality of flow state is that sense of self kind of evaporating.
Yeah, so I guess that feeling of, you're not really trying to do anything. It's almost like it's just flowing out of you. Whatever activity you're doing is just, flowing out of you, basically.
Hence the name of the state, right? The flow state. And then, flow, it's interesting. I think it's not popular, but there is a sort of pop culture understanding of flow. This is the best way to describe that is in the zone.
Yeah.
I'm in the zone. I think the pop culture understanding of flow is probably a wider circle than the academic understanding of flow itself. But that understanding says the catchphrase I like is when we feel our best and perform our best.
Yeah.
And it's that, again, am I experiencing that with a game I'm playing, or sports, or work, or and I think a lot of people end up in the zone sooner or later.
Yeah, exactly. So that feeling that you are completely, I think people will have that understanding, like that time when you're doing something and you're completely immersed in that experience, you're just dialed in and you're just in the zone, just being in the zone.
Working on the car in your garage, doing your gardening, doing, playing a game, right? There's lots of different ways that people find flow. And I think that pop culture understanding isn't as far off as some much worse pop culture understanding. So I'm happy to.
It isn't that bad. And and I know a lot of people think about it, like a big thought that people have with flow state is also like gaming, when, you're in front of a gaming and you're just in that zone, just gaming, because there's a lot of reference and research around like that sort of correlation between flow state and just gaming. And I think what is interesting and what we're doing here is how can we take that and be able to replicate that, something that so happens so easily within like a game and a gaming situation, and take that and replicate it into all different areas of our lives.
No, absolutely. What if it could feel somewhat effortless, right?
Exactly.
And so then you have this sort of spiritual understanding of flow, right? That it occurs in different spiritual traditions. Probably the easiest and best known would be in Taoism. The concept of the Tao is essentially this idea of flow. You don't force life. It just kind of happens. It's like you're plopping in a river, and they say so many people are trying to swim upstream against the current. There's a flow to life. Drop into it. Let it go. We have this in certain Vedic, Hindu, yogic practices. This concept of finding the flow of energy, allowing the flow. In Western understanding, the flow is something like destiny, but not exactly, right?
Yeah.
Destiny maybe goes a little too far, especially our sort of like Disney-fied version of destiny, and I think perhaps like ancient Jewish traditions around destiny probably meant more like flow than this one pathway you have to go. But it's this idea that there is a current to underlying reality, and that the more we try to control our reality, the more we're fighting that current for the most part. And that if we can find the flow, it's going to get easier. It's going to get more. The life will pull you in that direction rather than you having to fight or struggle as much.
Yeah. Pretty interesting. I know a lot of people are probably thinking, sounds good. Let me hear more.
Yeah. And so it's a kind of a bridge, right? My conceptualization of flow, Recess's conceptualization flow, I think, kind of tries to synthesize all of these definitions together and think about, okay, well, there's this clear neurological brain state.
Yeah.
We know that, right? There's also this place that people want to be. We know that, right? How do we bridge the gap between that brain state and people's lived experience? How do we help people find moments where they feel in flow, which we know is possible? But then as we build those moments, is it possible to create a life that feels more in flow, right? And that's the sort of big question we're set to task asking.
Yeah. Pretty good. So, Matt, what are some examples? Like, I know that we just defined it, but for you, like when you think about examples of flow states in your life, like what are some times that you felt in the flow in flow states,
Yeah. So I'm really lucky because I'm one of those people who figured out kind of early one of the things I really loved and wanted to do, which is like therapy and counseling, right? And got a lot of practice with it young and have been doing it for a while. And I'd like to think have a pretty high skill level, but also the challenge is really real. Like you're working with people who, are in pain and you want to help them work through that pain. I find that the easiest way for me to get in flow is to have a set of, 3 to 5 patients that I'm just like, boom, 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 boom. And sooner or later, my brain stops going, what should you say? Should you do this thing? What about that? Have you thought about? And it just sort of comes and it's all effortless. And then I look up and I realize, oh, my whole day just kind of passed. So with therapy, with individual coaching, that individual growth work, very like that for me. Another place I find is when I do speaking. I love to do public speaking. I love to get up on stage in front of a bunch of people. Initially, there may be okay, am I in the right room? Am I saying the right things? But after that, boom, it's gone. And I'm just performing and I'm just presenting. And it's really easy. I think the biggest challenge where it's hardest for me to be in flow is with my kids. I did not grow up around a lot of little kids. I don't have a bunch of practice with younger children. And so for me, I have no skill and the challenge is pretty darn high. And, I just find it's very easy to yank me out of flow. I find myself checking my phone all the time. I find myself getting frustrated all of the time. Right. And so I've been really practicing how to be more in flow with my kids. What is that? Part of that is me gaining skill, but the other part of that is, thinking about what I want those interactions to look and feel like, and trying to reverse engineer them.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned that in terms of, because I know a lot of people, based on the definition, could think that flow, we can't really control it. Like we can't build our capacity for flow states. They may think that, it's just something that's pulling us in a direction. But I it's really important to understand too that we can build the elements to increase flow state in different areas of our lives,
The metaphor I would use is, so say there's a radio station, I don't know, around here, 96.3 is a popular one, right? You can't grow or shrink that radio wave signal, but you can build your capacity to stay centered on that dial for a longer period of time in a more deep way, or be scanning the channels back and forth. And so you can't change this thing, but you can definitely improve your capacity.
Yeah, makes sense.
So how
So
about for you, Kelz? What areas of your life do you find flow occurring in?
yeah, so I think for me in general, like we're just working on the recess and what we're building here, I find myself getting into like increasing the amount of times I'm in flow state just when working on recess. Because for me, it's that perfect balance between, my passion, purpose, and also the challenge, trying to do something and my ability to do it. And so I feel like many times when working with recess, I get into these strides of flow states. It is this sort of effortless space that feels like it's just kind of pulling me through. And I think that's pretty interesting. And similarly, in terms of like some, product development stuff and design stuff, it's really easy for me to get into that space and, realize that, oh, wait, hours has passed. I'm feeling good. I'm not, it's not I'm not feeling stressed out, and I'm just feeling right in that zone. And I think that's really interesting. My experience with that. And I think, I would just say this too, that, coupling that feeling. I remember the first time in terms of like I extended almost flow state, I think happened like the first time that I actually was on like ADHD medication as well, which felt like an extended flow state in a way. Because also I was working on recess, I already have these elements, and so it just ended up, this extension of being in that zone for a couple hours. And yeah, really interesting experience, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess for me, in terms of like challenge or difficult times that I may find it hard, is really just administrative stuff, like stuff that is just not challenging, not interesting. I may have some ability, but it's not it, So I think I have a difficult time when doing like administrative tasks, those things that you just kind of have to do and you just struggle to do it. Yeah.
And there are people out there that love that, and
Mhm.
that is their flow, right? And
Mhm.
so the challenge is what's flow for one person might not be flow for another, and how do we plug each person into their right spot and right way? Like, oh gosh, if I had some magic wand, I could just magically reorganize society into everybody doing the things they cared about the most. Like, oh, what would that look like, right?
Yeah.
And I'm under no illusion that's going to happen overnight. But is there a possibility that if we each do the individual work to figure out what our unique strengths and weaknesses are, how to fill our needs, how to work through our pain and our fears, and plug into the thing which I don't believe is static, right? I
Mhm.
think those things will change throughout our lifetime, as they should. So it's definitely a moving target. I'm not saying find one thing and do it for 40 years and be in flow. I think as you change and your thing develops, that's going to change and develop as it should, because we live in a growing, changing world. But I think if people were more connected with themselves, more plugged into flow, I think we'd see systemic things changing as well as just individual experiences.
Yeah,
What is
definitely.
it like to have a company in flow rather than just an individual? What is it like to have an organization in flow, right? What would it look like to have a government in flow, right? I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, shut up, man. Going too far. All right. So, we'll start with people and maybe some companies and see what that looks
Companies,
like.
exactly. That idea of collective, like building on that sort of collective flow, Yeah, big and huge things could come out of that.
We have this concept. So, my background is in improv comedy, right? Improvisational theater and improv comedy. And we have this concept in improv called group mind. And this is, you practice with a team for a long time, the same people, you do a bunch of shows with them. And after a while, you know what they're going to do before they do it. And you know how to respond, and then you end up in this incredible, I'm getting goosebumps right now talking about it. Like, I've had these amazing shows where it was like I was not separate.
Mm-hmm.
I was part of this thing. It's a bad metaphor, but like machine, but it's not a machine. It's much more like a, emergent
Yeah.
life form. It's like
Yeah.
a multicellular organism, and it's an incredible feeling.
Yeah. I mean, that it is really, I think with what we're doing here is really to teams. I think as leaders and people who lead teams, is really important to think about how can we achieve that, how can we, for you it was improv, but there are ways that we could sort of create that sort of um space within our everyday work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, if I had to put a sales pitch together for flow, right? If I had to, okay, Matt, of all of the things that we should spend time on, I got my video games over here. Why should I spend 10 minutes of those video games on flow, right? Um, I can, I come from my particular background and my particular story, but I think it's a good place to start, right? Like, I'm a high achiever. I've always been a high achiever. And I probably always will be to some level, right? But there comes a point where, and we've all experienced this, and those people with ADHD, this is an interesting thing, right? Where you learn all the skills you can, and then you hit this plateau, right? Or you hit this wall. Like this initial momentum that took place for months or a year or 2 years or whatever, and eventually you hit this wall, right? And then you move into this place of either this weird sort of despondent coasting, where there's no more passion anymore. You're just doing what you have to do,
Yeah.
maintaining what you have to maintain, or you go the other direction and you start really trying to force it. You start really trying to hit it hard. And I think there's so many books, you and I have read these success books, right? Tim Ferriss, whatever, right? Like
Yeah.
and they're like, you got to make it your fucking obsession. You've got every single piece of your life has to be focused on it. You just got to keep pounding away at the brick wall. And I did that. I've been there. And I'm not sure. Number one, it's not very gratifying. Number two, it's absolutely exhausting and horrible for your body. Number three, it prevents you from engaging in other experiences that are meaningful in life. Like, you have to, at that point, you can only half-ass a relationship. You can only half-ass your friendships because it's all, oh my God, I got to get to this success point, right? So for me, one of the real cool things about flow is that we move from effort, like forcing things and surviving, to thriving. And it feels more sustainable and more organic. So it may not be as fast or as hard, but it's stronger, it's meatier, it's less easy for a breeze to shake it, and it doesn't exhaust you. And that space, as we move out of that, we tend to, out of the effort into the thriving, we tend to move more and more into that flow state.
Yeah, I like that. And as you're talking about that too, Matt, I think for me, what is really interesting is also the idea. You see that wall that we spoke about, that wall that you mentioned, is like almost every hero's journey has it. Like that's just how
Right.
life is. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just what it is. We continue along a stride, and then there is something. And I think for me, what is really interesting in this idea of flow is also the fact that it's very proactive. If we build a habit of building flow every day, we don't have to have that time when we are burnt out at the end of it, where we need to sort of rebuild, where we need to, have some sort of long-term reactive measure for something that has happened that has caused us to be thrown so much off course. I think
Yeah.
what is interesting about flow is that it's proactive, and it's something that we can do every day or build every day, that can have us, ebb and flow with the changes rather than go, hit a wall, crash, need to rebuild, be off for 2 months and rebuild from a different space. But we could kind of go and just ride the wave of life. So I think that's really what is interesting for me with flow. Want to get even deeper into flow state? Learn more about today's episode on our blog, The Science of Productivity. Find out more about today's topic by visiting our blog, Achieving Peak Performance, Mastering Flow State, with our neurotech app, Recess. Here you'll get more insight and tips on how you can maintain your flow state every day.
I think people get so used to the go and the force and crash, that the idea that it could be any different is a real mind blower, right?
Yeah.
And a stupid example would be like, do you want cavities or do you want to brush and floss?
Exactly.
Right. And nobody's saying brushing and flossing is like the most fun thing ever. Right. But when you, after a while, you brush and you floss, it's just whatever. Right. It's just,
Yeah.
you're in the, maybe, you can, it just kind of comes. Right. But that proactive approach, building these things up, is the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really what I really love about what we're doing here at Recess as well. Just helping to guide that sort of daily habits to build flow daily. And I think teams need to think about it, individuals need to think about it. But really, really appreciate. I think what we're doing here is that sort of gap in terms of building that sort of proactive like mental health and habit. Yeah.
And I would love if people could just hear this and go, okay, I want to do it.
Yeah.
But as you said, the wall tends to be part of the hero's journey. Most of the time, people don't get really interested into this stuff until they hit the wall. So if you haven't hit the wall yet and you're like, oh, posh, this flow stuff, that's fine. Bookmark this podcast. Come back in 2 or 3 years after you hit the wall. We'll be here, right? For me, I wouldn't be here with you today if it weren't for my wall, right?
Same. Yeah.
I had this thriving private practice, individuals, groups, everything's going, and something didn't feel right for them. They were getting like 70% better. I was only kind of 70% better. I remember like my 28th birthday with my wife and just going like, something's wrong. And she's like, time to go back to therapy. But did something different and found some of this bilateral stuff and this flow stuff, right? But it was, I could not have kept going at the pace and way in which I was going before.
Yeah.
And moving into flow has been a slow and steady process. It's not like, oh, you wake up and now you're in flow. It's like little by little, little more. And the more I move into flow, the hard part is you do have to make some changes because you haven't structured your life around that. You've created unsustainable decisions that reflect an unsustainable, forceful approach. And so you have to unwind all of that stuff. So I don't want anybody to think that this is the kind of thing where you can just snap and it's done. But with slow, steady, incremental improvement, just like going to the gym, but going to the gym for your brain, mental fitness, right? Little by little, you're going to get fitter and fitter until your brain is ripped. Until it's swole with health fitness, with mental health fitness, flow, swole.
Yeah. No, it's true. I think also we want to get into a little bit into, what are the elements of flow? Because we spoke a lot about flow, but when we talk about flow, what are we like? What do you need to get into flow? What are the elements or the parts of flow state really? And I mean, for us, we spoke about it. There are a bunch of different things, but for us, we have this model called the 5-factor flow model, and we'll probably just get into it, Matt, a little more so you could jump in.
Yeah, this model is unique. If you look for it anywhere else, you're not going to find it. If you look at, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the sort of flow stuff, they're going to give you 10 different sort of qualities of flow, but those qualities don't explain how do you get there. The best advice for how to get to flow is go do things that feel like you're in flow and do them more, right? Well, okay, but what are the atoms of the flow experience, right? And what I would like to suggest is as we go through the 5 factors and each of the sort of 3 qualities within each of those factors, what I would like to suggest is that if you build any of these factors, it's drawing you closer to flow.
Mm-hmm.
And you can build these factors in a specific fashion within a specific context, or you can build these factors in a general sense. And I would like to say, I think the most bang for your buck is sort of the general sense, because then it can apply to a bunch of different examples. But for some people, you have to really build something in a specific context first. And then you go, oh, okay, this works. Let me generalize it. So whether you decide to go the specific approach to see the results quickly, or you decide to go in a more general sense to see the results taking place over time in multiple different areas, either way, any work on each of these, qualities is bringing you closer to flow. So that's the cool part.
Yeah.
So the 5 factors overall, that is the 5-factor flow model that's unique to Recess and the flow work you've been doing and I've been doing. I'm going to go through them quickly and I'm going to define each of them. First, presence. Second, peace. Third, purpose. Fourth, potential. Fifth is play. Let's go through one of those at a time. So presence. What is presence? The three kind of elements of presence. The first is awareness, right? Your conscious awareness, the ability to be aware and engaged in the situation I'm having, right? If I'm not conscious, if I'm not aware, it's not happening. Tree falls in the forest, So the awareness is the ability to perceive and engage with whatever reality, whether it's a basketball game or a piece of art or a conversation you're having, right? The second element of that presence is focus. Can I engage and focus on the necessary ingredients for whatever I'm doing, right? If I'm supposed to be doing a PowerPoint presentation, I'm playing video games, it's not focused, right? It's not going to work. You're not going to be in flow, right? Am I focused on you talking? Am I listening to you? Or am I focused on worrying about the next thing I'm going to say? Right.
Yeah.
So where is my focus being placed? Right. And how sharp or how crisp is that focus? And mediating is, you mentioned ADHD. I grew up ADHD. I could give you hours and hours worth of, material around focus. Right. It is absolutely a skill. You can absolutely build the skill. The better you get at focusing and attending to what you want to and when you want to will mitigate that presence factor.
Yeah.
And then the final quality is energy. Now, I'm not talking about energy. I'm talking about tangible caloric energy, right? What does that mean? That means sleep, diet, exercise, breathing, right? Sunlight, right? How do I get energy, process energy, and use energy, right?
Yeah.
If you want to keep it super basic, am I engaging in a bunch of things during the day that are stealing my energy without giving anything back? Or am I engaging in things that are actually giving more energy than I came with, right? So we can kind of call that net energy positive or net energy negative or net energy neutral experiences, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, you can build a life where at least some days you actually end up at 8 p.m. with more energy than you had at 10 a.m.
Yeah. I know some people are like, wow, is that really possible? But it is.
I would like to say at least 3 days a week that's happening to me.
Yes.
And it's, again, because of the work I do and the things I care about. So awareness, focus, and energy. That's what goes into presence. And ultimately, presence means I'm here, engaged in the present moment, not in my head or in another place in the past or the past or the future, right?
Yeah.
I'm totally present.
And I wanted to say this too, that we found that from even the recess. Just want to just stick a pin on this too, that people have found that this was the most useful session, and people really reported like high numbers when it comes to the present session. Really what we're doing could really help you to get into that space of focus and awareness with recess. And I think a lot of people struggle with just simply, it's a big portion of flow when you think about it, because a lot of people do struggle to get into that space of focus and awareness.
I'm not lifelong, but a long time meditator, and I love to meditate. And there's some mornings where that doesn't do it for me, but I sit down in front of my light bar and I do 10 minutes of, I do my 10-minute recess and boom, I'm ready to work.
Exactly.
And it's not like you turn it off and it goes, like it's not like you just kind of turn around, you start at the computer and it all just kind of comes instead of you having to force it. So it's the absence of resistance is really what a lot of people report experiencing.
Yeah.
So that's presence, right?
Presence, yes.
Second quality, peace. Okay. What goes into peace? First, stress. The more stressed you are, or the more stressful this thing is, the less you're going to be in peace, the harder it is going to be in flow, right? If the challenge exceeds the skill level, that's where we start going into that stress zone. Yeah. If we're trying to deal with 20 things and we only have the bandwidth for 5 things, again, I can go into like hours and hours of content on stress, and I will stay tuned for future podcasts. And we'll talk about that, but you know what stress is, right? It's, too much, your body trying to process too much information, right? So that's number one. Number two is safety, right? Item number one, if you're not physically safe, you're not going to be in flow. So you've got to take care of those survival things first and foremost. And then there's psychological safety, right? Am I working on a project with somebody I don't trust? It's not going to work. Am I trying to connect with a person that, again, I don't trust? Am I, do I not trust myself? Anyway, psychological safety. Do I know I have a paycheck coming next week? Do I, how's COVID affecting all of this, right? We were, thrown into COVID. It really threw off our psychological safety, right? I could get
Sure.
sick tomorrow. And suddenly some things stopped mattering and new things started mattering. And those things, most of those new things were not very in flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So safety. And then finally is stability, having a stable, consistent schedule, knowing things are going to be, here today, here tomorrow, stable relationships, stable expectations, stable things at work, right? So consistency, routines, right? Those things go into stability. So stress, safety, stability, those three elements, if you grow those elements, it's going to increase your peace.
Your piece, yeah. And I think for a lot of people too, again, just, I think a lot of people, especially, high performers, etc., we have this sort of anxious state as well. So also that people who, really struggle with just anxiety in general, and just high levels of stress, you really, if you're in that space where you're super anxious and super stressed, you're not gonna get into flow. So yeah.
I mean, I think you're going to find that people, high achievers, we're about to move into purpose. High achievers have a lot of purpose,
Yeah.
but some of the ways in which they involve themselves with purpose ends up actually decreasing their peace factor,
Yeah.
which makes it harder to get into flow, right? Or decreasing their presence factor. So, as you guys are thinking about this, go, okay, which of these areas am I the highest in and which am I the lowest, right?
Mhm.
What areas, maybe don't start with the lowest, which one's in the middle, which one can I excessively grow, right? And then maybe grow some of the more difficult ones. Yeah. So third is purpose, right? What's purpose? I think we probably have a good sense of that. First and foremost, it's achievement. What have I already achieved? What are my skills already? What have I already created? What have I already accomplished? Right? That's my achievement. And then, so that's in the past. And then the next is goals, right? What am I trying to achieve? What am I wanting to create? What's my vision? Where am I going? And then finally is the passion, which is the energy that we put into that process, right? How much do I love this thing? How much do I care about this thing? You're talking about recess, and you're talking about like, oh, I'm finding flow in recess because this passion is high, right?
Yeah.
And then you go into the admin tasks and your passion is incredibly low, right? And so you're out of flow, right? So that passion, which is, think of passion as an energy of enthusiasm, right? That energy of enthusiasm can be grown and cultivated. You're not just going to wake up feeling passionate about something tomorrow, right? You have to grow and cultivate these things. You plant the seed of curiosity and it grows into the tree of passion, right?
Yeah.
So achievement, goals, passion, that's what makes up that purpose element.
Yeah, and I really like the purpose element as well too, because of just that connection, because a lot of us, we focus on just getting things done, just goals, productivity, achievement, but just that the realization that needs to be in tandem with that sense of passion, to really have that purpose. So there's a bigger why, there's a bigger feeling, there's more energy associated with the goals that we actually are going to achieve.
Yeah. Otherwise, it will not be sustainable.
Yeah.
You will hit a wall. If you're just doing to impress somebody else or doing to get a bunch of stuff, it'll last you a certain number of years. It'll last you a certain number of months, but sooner or later, you're going to hit the wall.
Crash. Yeah. Yeah.
Fourth element, right? We've got presence, we've got peace, we've got purpose. Fourth element is potential, right?
Mm-hmm.
My potential as a creative individual. So what does that look like? First, capability, right? Skill level. What have I done? What have I done in the past, but not so much the achievement as my sense of capability regarding those things. Oh, I'm good at therapy. I'm good at speaking, right? Versus I've done therapy and I've done speaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have this capability. You give me a Rubik's Cube. Okay. I used to know how to do that without looking.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it anymore. But I would have a greater sense of capability doing that than if you gave me a different kind of puzzle I've never done before, right? I would be able to say, okay, I don't remember how to do it anymore, but I know I can figure it out because I figured it out in the past.
Yeah. And also,
right?
I think, and also, as we're talking about this element too, in terms of what you're saying, you build that based on past experiences, but also keeping in mind that some persons may have that past experience, but they may still not feel capable. And that comes
Yeah.
back to some of the other stuff. But, also, it is also important for people to understand that is the feeling or the acknowledgement of your capability. Do you feel capable?
See, this is where it gets tricky, right?
Yeah.
Like you and I could accomplish the same thing, but your feeling of capability may be lower or higher based on that than
Yeah.
mine, based on my relationship with myself or my relationship with the world. It's the same with like the stress stuff, right? Something may stress you that doesn't stress me, or vice versa. So, that's why it's really challenging, because each of these things we're in relationship with in a different way. But to your point, the capability is really a lot mitigated by the second part for potential, which is your worth, right?
Yeah.
So, do you know you're worthy? Do you put yourself on a hierarchy with like Albert Einstein's up here and I'm down here and the guy who does my garbage is down there? Or do I go, oh, actually, we all have the same capacity? Down in terms of our worth, right? We're all equally worthy, right? I always say, when you look at a little baby, right? Is that baby worthy? Of course, but it doesn't have a job. It doesn't have a car. When does it lose it?
Exactly.
Around 13? I don't know, right? But this is a whole sort of philosophical tangent that we don't need to go down, but knowing that worth, being able to be in touch with that worth, right?
Yeah.
I always compare it to like, you're the painter, you're not the painting.
Yeah.
Right? We get really attached to, oh, I made that beautiful thing, that painting, right? Well, yeah, cool. But you're the painter, and you can paint another one, and another one, and another one.
Exactly.
Right. So, and then the third part of that potential, which may come as a surprise, is connection. Why connection, right? Because our potential increases within connection, right? The things that I can accomplish on my own are very different than the things I can accomplish together with you and Lisanne. Right.
Yeah.
And so potential is also raised by connection. And so there is absolutely a lot of flow research, people doing things individually, but there's also a fair amount of people doing it in connection. That's that improv group mind thing, right? So the value of connection and creating something that has a greater potential than ourselves, that helps us step outside our own little individual ego and get into this greater, bigger thing that often can carry people very far, much farther than their own individual wants or needs. But you have to be in a healthy place in order for that to work. Otherwise, it becomes dysfunctional, just like anything else.
Yeah, so I guess that's like adding that element of synergy to that feeling of capability. Yeah. And what about play? I always found it. I mean, the fifth factor here is play. I feel like that's an interesting one that people may not think is going to be a factor, but tell us about play as a factor.
So when you look at the flow research, most people say that was really enjoyable.
Yeah.
Right after they're out of the experience. So what does that mean, right? That means that play, and we know this, we don't like to admit it, that play is actually an essential factor of good work, right? And you can see this, more with like, okay, you go to the Google campus and they got the foosball table and they've got, yeah. It's kind of like that, right?
Yeah.
But more like the thing we're doing needs to be playful.
Yeah,
now,
it is.
You can get it inside or outside. Go to the foosball table and bring it back. That's good. But also in the context of whatever project we're working on or flow experience we're having, right? It's got, on some level, it has to be enjoyable.
Yeah. And I was just going to say too, like, it's that element, because we understand it when it comes to children. We understand that play is an important element in terms of development. But at some point in our journey to adults, we completely forget that element, So I think it's interesting because in developmental psychology, we know that play is important, right?
Yeah. And it is for adults. So play. Let me operationalize this for you and make it super tangible. Number one, curiosity. Asking good questions, wanting to find out more, wanting to go deeper, right? People who are curious are going to find passion. People who are curious are going to find connections. People who are curious are going to be engaged in the present moment, right? So that curiosity that comes with play, as these factors are all intertwined with each other, right? But I want to show how these maybe more abstract factors are very tangible, right? So being able to be curious, Recess has a question. How can we help democratize this flow state technology, right? We're curious. Is this possible? If so, what would the world look like, right? There's the curiosity behind the passion, right? And then the next part of play is creation. Play is about being creative. Play is about coming up with new things. My son is playing when he makes up new words, or when he, plays a new game, or right. And so we're all trying to create things: art, sports records, relationships, businesses, a mansion with a super yacht, whatever you want to, right? We're trying to create, right? But creation arises out of that play. We try to transport creation away from play and make it into, like, okay, serious, like, okay, what are the deliverables, and who's the stakeholder, and blah blah blah, and that's, look, you've got to have some of that. But if you can infuse a playful energy into that, I think you're going to find that again is a much more sustainable, right? If it's all business all the time, then in a couple of months you're going to be bored or disengaged. But if there's creative play involved in that creation, it's going to be a lot more sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, joy, right? Again, what does that mean? That means enjoying what you're doing. If you will find it impossible to find flow if the thing you're doing is horribly yucky, unfun, right? And believe it or not, there's somebody out there that says, that's fun, I want to do that. Okay, all right, cool, great. Virtual assistant, that's fantastic that your flow is admin, because it's not mine. But we need to find that joy, and that joy can come with ourselves, can come with the activity, can come with other people. But if there's no joy, the flow will not be sustainable. You can't force flow. It is counter, it's counter indicated. It's not going to work. So that's play.
Yeah, I love it. I think this is really helpful for some people. And I'd just like to also add that we do have our ultimate guide to flow state on the website, where if you want to get a little more in depth and you want to just read this, you could also go to the website and click the ultimate guide to flow state to read more about it and see it in black and white. So you could start to build some of these factors within your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, Kelz, Recess is trying to make this flow state accessible. Do you want to talk a little bit about how we're trying to do that? What does that look like tangibly, within the app, and how can we help so that you guys understand how that conceptual stuff becomes practical?
Yeah. So for us, our biggest goal, as we were talking, is really to almost give a quick and easy hack to flow state. How could we make it easy for you to get into flow for just 10 minutes a day, right? Just 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day. You do one of our sessions. And you get into flow. But in terms of breaking down those steps a bit more, I just want to give a idea of how that would be. You open the application, you track some of those goals, intentions for the day, and the application then recommends the right session. So we're able to pull out, from your goals and your mood, and we're able to pull out some information on your flow score, your level of stress, how on purpose or productive you are, and then we're able to recommend the right session that you would need. One of these 4 sessions: peace, purpose, potential, and presence, and which session will be the most needed for you. And you do that whether or not you do a VR session, an AR session, or one of our audio sessions. You do a 10-minute session of bilateral stimulation to help you to process some of that, to build flow for that particular day, right? And Matt, maybe you could speak more on some of the science behind that, like just quickly in terms of, what does that look like for one of the session, but and how exactly, what the session actually entails a bit.
Yeah, so let's be super practical. Okay, say there's a project that I want to do for work, and I'm trying to get it done, but I can't, and it feels out of flow, and it's yucky, and I keep procrastinating. Okay, cool. So file the quality report. I don't know, right? It's horrible. You have to get on Excel. Nobody likes it. Okay, so you got your quality report, right? Pull out Recess. If it's your intention in your daily recess that day to get that quality report done, put that in your intention. It's going to ask you to rank the skill level and the challenge level. And it may be that your skill level is really high and the challenge is really low. and that's part of what's keeping you out of flow. And so we're going to recommend something different based on that than if your skill level's low and the challenge is high.
Yeah.
So we want to get that data rather than just pull up the bilateral processing. Okay, so we figured that out. We also figure out your stress level, right? So if you're really stressed, we're going to want to help calm your body down before we move you into productivity.
Yeah.
If you're really like tired and shut down, we want to actually boost your energy level before we get you there. So that stress level is really important. We put that all together, we make a flow state recommendation, and then based on that, we recommend which, we'd want to do. So in this case, say that your skill level is actually really high and the challenge is actually really low.
Mm-hmm.
What we're going to do is we're going to move you into the purpose session, because we want to help assign some passion and some energy to this project so that you can move forward. If you've already done a purpose session, we may recommend a present session to help narrow your focus, but we're not going to represent peace because you're feeling too calm. If anything, you're not doing the thing right, and we're not going to do potential because you're already feeling skilled, right? So you do purpose, you do presence, right? What does that look like? Get in front of the app. You're going to see a ball moving back and forth. You're going to follow that ball back and forth with your eyes. There's going to be some audio guidance to kind of help engage you, and basically you're going to picture yourself. If it's presence, you're going to picture yourself doing the task. If it's purpose, you're going to kind of picture yourself completing the task and how it's going to feel, and, connecting you to that end result. That will be kind of the energy. It's like, oh, it's going to feel so good when it's done. And maybe I'll get feedback from my boss. That'll be good. And maybe I'll be able to go and watch, some sports game, whatever. Right. So whatever it helps to positively connect some energy, that would be purpose. And presence is just going to be kind of picturing you focusing and getting it done. And so more of the present moment. Either way, depending on what you need, follow lights, follow the ball rather, and you're going to find in 5 or 10 minutes. And some people end the session early and they're like, I'm ready right now. Exactly. And it's not like a angels trumpeting, heavens parting kind of thing. It's just like, no, I'm ready. Let's go. And you'll find yourself pretty quickly. If it worked, it's magic. In 10 minutes, you will have forgotten that you just started the task because you're and you've been doing it, and you're going to be done with it in 20 minutes.
And I will also want to say from my experience in just using recess, within that 10 minutes is such an interesting, bilateral stimulation itself is such an interesting thing, because during that 10 minutes, you feel a physical release. You feel your sense getting into that space. You start off simply just following the ball and you actually feel the release physically. And I think that is the place where you just sort of unlock this sort of flow state. So simply put, with recess, we just consider ourselves a brain hack to daily flow state. We're just trying to make it quicker, easier, more accessible for anybody to get into flow state. And that's what we're doing with recess.
Yeah. Pretty powerful. And then, you guys got to do the work on your own on those individual areas, right? Recess is only going to be able to help so much and point you in the right direction. But ultimately, those areas, those are things that we're going to want to grow and build in our lives. And, recess is going to we got some material. We're going to continue to produce more that helps kind of give you guys some, adjunct guidance on all of that. But, we're an app. We can take you a specific portion. And then from there, it's your continued growth journey, right?
Exactly.
That we're excited to be a part of your growth journey, leading you into flow, helping you build mental fitness.
Exactly. And I love that you mentioned that, because as we're building this community, is more than just the application. That's just the start. We really want to continue these conversations and give, just more content and more information to how you could really just grow flow into all these different areas of your life. So we're going to have, more blogs, more podcasts, more events, more, speaking, recess talks to really, so more than the application, what we're really doing is helping us build flow in our daily lives. And that's what we're here for.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, everybody, thank you for joining us today and our Flow with Recess Flow podcast. We hope you guys understand flow a little better, understand some of the knobs and levers you need to push. Again, there are, kind of some corresponding blogs you guys can read to dive in deeper, or keep listening to the podcast. We'll dive in deeper into these different elements. Basically, each month we pick an element, and then 2 of those podcasts will dive deep into those different elements, and we'll keep cycling and we'll keep going deep. Thank you guys for being here today. We wish everybody, happy flowing, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys on the next Flow with Recess podcast.
All right. Till next time. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Flow with Recess. By the way, your flow doesn't have to end here. Our Recess app helps listeners unlock their most productive selves by reducing anxiety and improving their focus. You can find out more about our app as well as more resources to support you on your journey by visiting our website withrecess.com. Links to our bilateral playlist and this week's blog post are also found in our show notes. Until next time, find your flow and get unstuck with Recess.